according to that, I am live. Welcome, this is Tokyo Tonight. Good to see you all. Odi Jr., especially First Boom, and Guys English World. Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Good to have you. Here's the second Boom and Quint Ranked, and great to see Erin. Erin, thank you again so much for offering to help out with an experiment that I'm going to try this week with the channel. Oh, I've just realized I have the setting. One thing I was thinking was, well, I'll explain this. So I'm toying around with the idea that, the channel hasn't really been growing much, and that's probably because the long format's kind of hard for new viewers to get into. So I was thinking about switching from this normal format to sort of switching up that when I'm focusing and I'm talking news, I might show a different video format so that it gets easier to go and edit later on. Yeah, I thought if I do that, maybe that'll work. Although also now that I look at it, I'm tempted to play around with it because obviously it's not quite lined up in the right place. Oh, and now I'm messing with the screen in ways I didn't mean to, so I'm not going to do that. Let's put that back. So anyway, I probably won't do that, but it's something I'm thinking I might just try to make it easier for editing and so on, to try to cut out little sections of the show to make them easier to edit. You know what? I'm just thinking I will probably keep it simple and keep it on the regular format that's properly set up. But yes, so it's basically what I was talking about last week. Is this idea that I'd like to be able to maybe just take 2 or 3, starting out maybe 1 or 2 just of the interesting parts of the show, just for people to realize what this is all about, just talking about news and topics and so on in a more digestible format. And yeah, if you like it, and if people like the look of the joining the chat and joining the live stream, they can do it. But otherwise, yeah, just hoping to make it a bit more discoverable and see if that changes things. So yeah, Erin, I really appreciate the offer of help with that, and very excited to see how that goes. Good to see more people rolling in. We've got Barry Convex, we've got Tai Nakamura. Good to see you. Ohio indeed, where you are. Believe in yourself. Good to have you in here. And reviews of the Kirin N3 Pro, DAC with tubes. I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'm sure it's very good. Yeah, remember, if you are in the chat, as always, say hello. It's always nice to see people, see where people are checking in from. I always get a buzz out of seeing people from countries that I didn't realize people were at before. It's already a great spread of people around the world that seem to join this every week. Also, remember, if you want to grab my attention, as always, at Mark Kiko Simon, it'll pop up, you'll see it, it'll pop up orange to me in the chat there. And that'll make it better for that. When I do go back and look at comments, I'll scroll back and hopefully I'll be able to catch it. And I will always make an effort to respond to questions or requests for topics if you highlight them orange. So please do that. Yeah, just thinking about the new format, like I said, to make it a little bit more, to pull out little bite-sized bits of it, I'm going to try tonight. Tonight's going to be an experiment to see if I can avoid the squirrel chasing that often happens. There are actually quite a number of topics tonight and a lot of things to talk about, so all the more reason to focus. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to stay focused when I'm telling the main bit of the story, and I'll try to also be mindful to leave little gaps and to make each part easy to cut out. We'll see how I go at that. I'm not very good at it. But yeah, I'll try to also then switch at the end to actually making sure I'm focusing on the comments as well, so everybody is, gets to participate as well. Especially, I enjoy it the most when people are able to ask me questions and give me topics to talk about. Back up, ahoy from Germany. That's good German there. I've got a topic on German for the show tonight. If you follow me on Twitter, you may already know what it's about. But yeah, the German language, it impressed me this week. We've got not that much desk. Glad that you made it. Almost, you're in time, man. I'm still settling in. We haven't yet started. So yeah, Theodore Sharp, I'm good. How are you? Good to see you there in the chat. Mr. Cordy Chap, you woke up in time. Aren't you in Australia? In which case it'd be like an hour after here. It'd be like 11:30 p.m. Well, anyway, whatever time it is and whatever part of the world you're in, it's good to have you back, as always, Mr. Cordy Chap, and everybody else. Nice to see people checking in. So yeah, it has been an interesting week for news in Japan. So there's a bit to talk about there. Maybe before I also get into the news, other announcements and whatnot. One thing to talk about is yes, I think I mentioned on Twitter today, I've been thinking about what to do with MyChan TV, and two things with that. One, I haven't been able to give it the time and the love to sort of keep it running the way that I really would like it to. And another part of that is also I've come to realize that I pay for YouTube Premium myself, just to sort of I like to have access to all the best features on it and to be able to support other creators as a premium user. Just watching their videos, apparently they get extra like ad revenue, or apparently the more premium users view your channel, the more credit you get for it. But more than that, what I really like about premium is the fact that you can download videos to watch later, like as an autoplay list. And that's pretty much what I wanted to do with MyChan TV. I made it so that your subscriptions would basically be able to curate an autoplay. It's not as good as MyChan TV, but you can actually scroll through pretty quickly and pick out and download the videos you want to watch. And I find this good for when you're on the train or whatever, whenever you're in a place with bad reception and you want to watch videos to pass the time. It's like a ready-to-go TV channel, and that's how I've been using it. So I think that the original gap which MyChan TV was trying to fill is no longer there, or it's there, but it's well enough addressed by YouTube Premium that I think that's one thing, and it's just taken a lot of time. And as much as I like keeping the site up there, it costs money to keep going. The app itself is basically not earning anything, and it's costing me a lot every month. So I thought what I'll do is it's been a great project learning how to build that, and that I think I do want to do something like that again. I've learned a lot from it, but I'm going to take back the savings I will get from not having to host that anymore, and put it into things like trying to grow this channel and improve the show just in little bits, see if I can improve the engagement and whatnot. And in time, I'd like to do, I work in tech. I never talk about my current job, so I won't go into detail about it, but I work. We're in an exciting time where there's a lot of really cool new technology where, even 5 or 6 years ago, you needed to be a big company to be able to set up an AI app or to set up a, Internet of Things solution. And nowadays, anyone can do it. It's basically next to free to be able to set up supercomputer technology and turn it off. And it's really exciting. And I work around this area, if not directly in the middle of it, as you know, I'm in the legal profession by trade, but I'm really close to all of this. And I'm going to definitely do something again. I'll just look for the right opportunity, and I will dive in again. I really appreciate everybody on this channel who's supported with that, and I don't know exactly how I'm going to wind it down, but just a heads up that I'm now looking at that, and I'm probably going to do that in the next couple of weeks. So other than that, in Tokyo, weather, by the way, that has been lovely. I mean, it's the start of February. It should still be like snowing and freezing cold here, but it's like spring. It's been lovely the last couple of days. Of course, if you have hay fever, it is the worst time of year. If you have a pine pollen hay fever, I am lucky. I get hay fever, but I get it in the autumn and the fall, not in spring. So, but I know people who get spring hay fever from the Japanese pine pollen are starting to die, and it's going to get worse after this. So my commiserations if you have that. But nice to see more people rocking in. Let's see, there's I think we saw Theodore Sharp before. So Sergeant Bilko, excellent to see you. Yes, indeed, good to see our resident Swedish Sergeant in the comments. Good to see you. We've got Aaron's using YT Premium as well. Honestly, just for me, just the downloading feature makes it worth it. The content, it was like, okay, it was nice seeing Karate Kid, but even that got taken over by Netflix. That was a bit of a fail. Google sort of seems to fail at everything that involves the people, but anything algorithmic and cool, like Google News and like the search engine and like this, they seem to do pretty well. So it's worth it for me. PB, greetings. Good to have you in the chat and welcome. Also good to see Paragotti. Oh, and everybody, yes, indeed. If you like, well, if you're a discerning shopper, you can wait until the end of the show and then give your evaluation. But why not just hit like now as well? I mean, if you do, I do appreciate it. It does support the channel, and that is the focus I'm turning to next. Just doing some little tweaks without making it too much extra labor. Hopefully, seeing if we can improve things. Great to see so many people rocking in. Remember, if you haven't said hello, say hello. I mean, it's just nice to see that you're there. I mean, PB did it. That's all you got to say. Just put an exclamation point or something. But yeah, I think those are the intros and everything. So I'm going to jump in. So just bear in mind, I'm going to do a little bit of a new format and see how we go. Where I'm just going to try to be disciplined and not well, that's not going to work, but I'm going to try. So yeah, I'll tell you what I might do at the end of the show. Stand by towards the end. I'm going to pick out 3 shows to do the experimental, sort of 3 stories to do little cutout shortened episodes of for people during the week, just so that they can get a sense of what this is about. Perhaps we can even take a vote what people thought were the best topics, although I'll probably decide that myself, but I'll be interested. We'll see how I go. So with that said, Jennifer L, that is a name I do not recognize. Good to see you, Jennifer L, and thank you for saying hello. Good to have you there in the comments. And as I've said to everybody else, drop a comment, chat among everybody else. PB, thank you for the super chat. I will hold back from jumping in. Am I related to Stanley Tucci? Tucci? I have no idea who Stanley Tucci is. He's obviously, or he or she, probably a he. I would say probably a very good-looking person. But who knows? I'll go look him up on 23andMe. We could be unknowingly related, but no, not to my knowledge. I'm afraid. And Sergeant Bilko, I have no idea what you're talking about. And Mr. Cordychet, please behave. We're now going into the recorded section of the show, so I will try to keep it together, which I know sounds like a dare to try to throw me off, but yeah. PB, I'm sorry. I wish I could give you more service off that comment, but I really can't. Except I feel like going and Googling right now. I'm actually feeling the urge to chase the squirrel and find out who Stanley Tucci is. But no, not to my knowledge. Anyway, so let's dive in. Lots of topics tonight. First one, really, really important stuff. So first topic that we have on this week's Tokyo Tonight is talking about Toto. Japan is basically 30 to 40 years in the future. It is actually kind of funny. So many people tell me how Japan is this big paradox where people have this image of Japan being in the future. It definitely used to be that way with mobile phones and with various sorts of tech. And they come here and then they find that, it is in some ways it's ahead, in some ways it's behind. And there are all these paradoxes when it comes to technology. And it's true. There's actually a word in Japanese called Galapagosization. Galapagos, the ization is cut in Japanese, and it's much easier just to add cut onto anything. And, it's just because Japan is basically technologically, culturally, linguistically isolated, and it's big enough it's not dependent on things coming from America or Europe to have cultural and technological trends. It just means that things happen here on different cycles. And one thing that, when mobile phones used to be ahead and then they fell behind, and then they were ahead in TV screens, and then Taiwan and Korea made better TV screens, and, everything's back and forward. Toilets are definitely still far in the future, and it just as you have TV shows about somebody, getting caught in the time slip and going back to the Middle Ages, or going back to like a Stone Age sort of civilization. Pretty sure anybody in such a scenario, they don't talk often about the toilet problems that they would have if they suddenly got transported back to the Middle Ages. But if you want to have an idea of what that would be like, live in Japan for a few years and then travel to any other supposedly civilized country and try using the toilets. It's just horrible. I actually literally, even in Asia, like near Asia, staying in nice hotels when they don't have Japanese style toilets, I would actually go have a shower after. You just don't feel clean. It's horrible. It actually ruins you for toilets everywhere else. And this idea apparently is not a new idea, this idea about toilets that will actually diagnose your poop and tell you how you are doing health-wise. In fact, I saw Wataru In, who's a naturalized Japanese citizen on Twitter, who tweets interesting stuff. When I posted this on Twitter today, he said, hey, this idea was, thrown around 30 years ago. The idea, not the poop. And it was, apparently it wasn't successful. People were a bit creeped out. Now there are people talking about smart toilets, and have your toilet hooked up to the internet. I don't know why you would want to hook it up to the, well, I suppose there is a joke about Twitter being people basically just shouting out to the world that they just took a crap. But, you could literally have it actually automatically do that right now. But, yeah, it to me, this makes sense. Look, maybe 30 years ago, Japan was able to get used to the idea of shooting water all over the place. And I mean, the story on Project X, if you only watch one Japanese TV show ever, I'm into documentaries and nonfiction, and Project X, a series about how stuff got invented in Japan. The story of the Toto washlet toilet on Project X is just one of the best episodes. And it was by an engineer who was trying to help his old dad who had hemorrhoids and just had a life of just misery and pain pooping, and he did this to basically help his old granddad, and the whole country sort of adopted it. And it was hugely controversial when it came out. They used television advertising, and it was a big controversy, but it is now absolutely standard in Japan. It's not far of a step, one, to actually put sensors in there to pick up health data. Plus, I actually think, I mean, look, I've got a watch which counts my steps and my heart rate, and, you know, now all of these things that have what do they call them, oximeters, things that measure the oxygen in your blood. I have something which measures how long I'm sleeping and whether I'm snoring, on my mattress. I've got a smart scale that I stand on every day. I collect a ton of health data, and I'm hoping that, and it actually has helped me, like, lose 10 kilos, more than that, 13 kilos since the pandemic started. So, I think we're living in this age where, and I'll give you another case. I have a family member overseas who had cancer and successfully went through a round of chemo and was able to get the chemo based on sort of latest cutting edge stuff where they can actually match your genetic profile to get the right amount of radiation. So basically they can actually do it with heaps less than they would give you on a standard course, and a higher percentage of a positive outcome, and that's what happened. So with all this sort of information and this data that you can collect about yourself, it can have positive sort of, just for self-awareness, like a set of scales, and down the road for other sorts of things. So for me, the idea of having sensors telling me, if I'm eating unhealthy stuff, or if I need to be more careful, or even early signs of illness or other stuff like that, to me this makes total sense. So you do that thing. I'll be first in line for a smart toilet. I am sold. Although a lot of people kind of scoffing at the idea that no, people will never buy it. But that's my take on that. I think smart toilets are the toilet wave of the future, which I know doesn't sound very attractive, but that's what I'm thinking about that. So that's the first story. Deliberate pause. Okay, now we're getting back into the comments. Make sure I say hello to people. Remember, if you want to particularly grab my attention, at Mark Hiko Simon, I will stop on the orange ones. Like, for example, Tudom did. So, hi, Hiko Simon says, Tudom, what do I think about the LDP proposal this week for new legislation on how Japan relates with Taiwan? Good question, and I don't have it on my set topic, so I will talk about that. Tricky one. Yes. I mean, look, I love Taiwan. In New Zealand, I have heaps of Taiwanese friends. New Zealand and Canada were like two of the top destinations for people escaping Taiwan, more or less, when they lifted martial law. People getting their kids out, they didn't want them doing conscription. Very common, same for Korea as well, that it's a very common thing to do. But look, Taiwan is a great country with, a population 25 more people than Australia. Very similar, very democratic, very similar to Japan. And this is the thing. They like Japan. It's like, they had a very similar experience in many ways to what Korea had. And the contrast of how Taiwanese feel towards Japan compared to, of course, they have a unique experience based on the mainland Chinese arrival in Taiwan arguably being a lot worse than the exiting Japanese one by the accounts of some Taiwanese people. Not to say that it was all, rainbows or whatever under Japanese occupation, but it was just they had something worse afterwards, which allowed people to feel a little bit nostalgic and a little bit not quite so harsh as Korea, which of course went through a lot after Japanese occupation, but ultimately achieved full independence. So, yeah, the way I see it is that Taiwan is one of Japan's few genuine, real, friends in the world, and it's kind of embarrassing that Japan, for wanting to appease China, which it understandably has to pretend that it doesn't exist. So anything that elevates Taiwan towards becoming a normal country, I hate the idea that the world has to pretend it doesn't exist to appease China. But there again, you never want to do something that ends up being bad for Taiwan. If it's something that Taiwan wants, which I think they do, I think it's a good thing, and I'm all for the proposed legislation to enhance ties with Taiwan. But at the same time, China's also pretty clear that they'll be open about willingness to start a war with Taiwan. If if it declares independence or if people sort of push it in that direction. So it's a fine tightrope to walk, but in the end of the day, I mean, look, any optimism that the idea that Taiwan could be reintroduced into China, sort of through a kind of one country, two or three systems approach like Hong Kong. Obviously, now you can see what's happened in Hong Kong. Obviously, that is not going to happen. So I think actually what's happened in Hong Kong is probably reinforcing the need to actually not allow Taiwan to slip into that sort of a future, and which I definitely agree with. So I'm all for it, But of course, you got to make sure that you're not trying to doing something that backfires on the people of Taiwan as you help them. But I think it's a good thing, Tudom, and I appreciate the comment and the question. Who else we got in here? We've got Shubas. We've got our man in Panama. Good morning, buenos dias. Good to have you here in the chat. Perfectly happy with your analog watch. No reason to send your data to China. Well, I just like having the data myself, actually. Not for running and so on. It's good, but yes, nothing wrong with wanting to keep your data private. What sort of smartwatch do I have? I have a Withings Activité. It's a French company. It was actually bought out by Nokia, but for a ton of money. And then when Nokia failed at it, the French person bought it back at a discount. So they actually made a huge profit selling it and buying it back again. It's a French company, but I got the smart scales and I got this. What I love about this, apart from the fact it looks like a normal watch, and it kind of is, battery lasts for a month, and then it takes like 30 minutes to charge. That's the thing. What I couldn't stand about the Samsung smartwatch, and what makes me hesitant about an Apple smartwatch, is that they just take so long to, they barely last a day. You can't wear them at night when normally you're going to charge them. And this is just great. It just looks like a normal watch. It looks like a normal watch. Battery goes on forever. Yet it measures my pulse. It measures my steps. It does all the stuff I'd want it to do. So yeah, that's what I've got. Tokyo 503, welcome to the show, by the way, and thank you for asking. Theodore Sharp, it was a popular commercial. That's right. You know the one, you saw the episode. And actually, the demonstration that they did, where they got these sort of tube of acrylic paint, and they put it on people's hands, and they said, wipe it with a tissue, and you wipe it with a tissue, and of course your hands are still dirty. And then they show you that if you use a wet tissue, or you put water on it, then you wipe it with paper, it becomes clean. And that was the demonstration. Don't you want that for your butthole too? Which you could say in Japanese, you say your bum. They use a kind of a softer word for it, but that's exactly what they said on the ad, and they sold billions of them. So yeah, it obviously worked. Would your toilet criticize you on your cheat days? Who knows? Probably would. I think that's the idea. It's like the scales. I use my smart scale every morning because that definitely criticizes me after my cheat days, which I have all weekend. So I've got to go back to be behaving during the week. So I think that's the idea. And yes, so we are quite up on the comments. I'm going to go to the next subject because going to move along. Got a lot of things tonight. This one I just popped in as well. This was this evening. I put this in the last minute, but of course, terrible what's happening in Myanmar. One thing is that Japan has been very heavily invested in the opening up of Myanmar. There's a lot going for Myanmar in terms of opening up and democratizing. The fact that it was a British colony, for a long time, and that most people there, I don't actually know if most or what percentage of the population, but of course it's an ethnically diverse country, and if English is still not spoken by everybody, it is somewhat of a lingua franca there, from what I understand. In fact, I used to live in New Zealand in the bottom half of a house that was owned by British people that were both born in Burma, both born in Rangoon. So, it was very much Commonwealth and British Empire, and they went into this sort of total isolation under the military dictatorship there. And with it opening up, what you effectively get is you get a reasonably well-educated, but also extremely low wage, but quite well-educated and English-speaking country right there, and so the benefits, for example, of wanting to set up offshore manufacturing or whatever in a country that has I believe a legal system and a language system that still is based on the British Empire to some extent, so there's some interoperability. That's not just for Japan, that's for other multinational companies. There was a bit of a gold rush going into Myanmar, and the hope was that this opening up, the ending of sanctions and all this business piling into Myanmar would be what would give it the solid foundation and the wealth that would discourage the military from misbehaving ever again, and for allowing the country to become democratic. And Japanese companies piled in there. including Kirin. Actually, a bunch of Japanese companies really led the way with investing in Burma when it opened up. I said Burma, I should probably say Myanmar. It's not like calling it Rhodesia. Apparently it's political. The military changed the name to Myanmar, but the elected Democratic Party in Myanmar actually doesn't agree with the name change and wants to call it Burma. But so the coup happened, and now there's this dilemma. The US has said that sanctions go back on if the military doesn't back down, and so far it doesn't look like it's going to back down. It's good to hear that it sounds like there are protests in Myanmar, but at the same time, I mean, is it safe to protest? And the military there has, carried out genocide in recent years against, at risk of mispronouncing the Rohingyas. They've cut off all the internet, so they're sort of in full control there. But very good to see that Kirin, I believe the biggest drink company in the world, is pulling out right away. They're just sort of saying that their tie-up company there is linked to the domestic drink company that they're tied up to does have ties to the military. Not cool having a military coup, and they are pulling out, and hopefully other Japanese companies will follow and not go in the sort of grey zone of allowing. I think you've got to maximize the pressure on the military to realize that they've made an enormous mistake. It's kind of hard when you've got Thailand that's been more or less allowed to get away with a military coup, dictatorship next door, and Myanmar is going back into the same thing. The biggest risk, I suppose, is that China is likely to do business with the military then. And I suppose if the rest of the world isolates Myanmar, it'll probably just reinforce China's influence there, which will be to prop up and support the dictatorship and make sure that they can succeed and that they don't feel the pressure to leave. But if there's any pressure in the right direction, Japan really has a really big lever to pull. So I'm very glad to see that Japan is pulling the plug on its support there. And I hope, again, there are really aggressive sanctions there to show the military there that, no military has any business in running the government of any country. The whole notion of military is that you're there to defend the country against external threats, not to participate in the politics of the country. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Obviously, that's not well understood in Myanmar or Thailand or a lot of other countries, but I hope they get the message across. So Savas Musician, excellent to see you. Quite a few students from Myanmar at your local language school in Osaka. Indeed, I hope they let more students through. And indeed, this is a thing that's been so isolated for so long. I really do hope that this doesn't cause the country to be isolated again, because it's the people there that it sucks for. So I really hope that this gets reversed. Next story. This is just another interesting one about the pandemic. I was looking back the other day when people were talking about, I saw a story in America talking about this time 12 months ago, America is still saying, we're not going to get that coronavirus thing here. And it made me think, when did this start? And when did I start tweeting about it? So I searched through my tweets and I found my first ever tweets, and they were like basically a week ago, a year today, where it was just flaring up in Wuhan, and the first evacuation flights were actually happening this year, this time 12 months ago last year. So we didn't have the cruise liner yet, but we did have the rushed evacuation, and people not being tested on arrival back, some people refusing testing and saying screw you and going home and turning out to have it. And this was how it came into Japan, was basically through sort of a botched, rushed evacuation of people from Wuhan. I think I tweeted the first comment I ever made about this whole thing was one, this is likely to hit us. And, if we still have the pandemic, if this is still going in July, we'll have bigger problems than the Olympics. And that turned out to be true. I never really imagined that even if it came here, that it would actually last more than 3 or 4 months. But we're coming up on 12 months, and it's kind of crazy. One thing that happened in Japan that's been interesting being in the tech world is how people took on working from home. A lot of companies sort of aggressively realized, we have to, buy people laptops and set up remote work connections and so on, where they had no infrastructure for it. So it actually did cause a bit of a boom in some IT, where traditional IT projects that needed everybody to be there all got frozen, like in all countries. But in Japan, where you've got so many offices that people just don't have the ability to work from home, a lot of companies in Japan went on spending sprees setting up sort of remote work infrastructure. And so it's funny, in July 2020, they did a survey on whether whether people think that working remotely will take hold from now on, 27% of people agreed with it. 46.3% of people thought, yeah, probably. And 20% people said they don't think it will catch on. But it's funny, in December 2020, they took the same poll again. The number of people who thought that remote working would catch on went down from 27 to 17%. About the same number of people thought, yeah, maybe, but the number of people who thought, no, it's not going to catch on increased to 32%. So actually people are less convinced that teleworking can work in Japan now than they were 4 months into the pandemic, which is taking the start really being from March, I suppose, at least when the shutdown started. So kind of interesting that, and by the way, this is a thing that happens in IT consulting. I remember my very first job in Japan, when I was doing IT consulting, they show you this graph where you start at the start of a project, you sort of down the bottom, and then there's this huge spike of expectation and hope and optimism at the start of a project that, we're going to fix the world problems, world peace. And then when people realize, it's actually hard work and it's not going to actually do all the magical things I thought it would be, it crashes back down again. There's a crash at about the 3-month point of any project where people sort of start to realize. And then then it goes down again, where people sort of start to become resentful and angry at what's sort of happening. And then you go through the sort of phases of grief thing, where it sort of goes up and down as people sort of, they start to come to terms with it. And, in the end, you sort of hope that there's a bit of an upward thing at the end, where they've sort of been through, they have now adjusted realistic expectations. And they finally see the reason why they started out, but it wasn't for the huge spike, reason. It was just for the general, it's going to be a bit better. But it's like grief. It's like how people deal with a lot of things. I would say that what this graph is representing in an IT project perspective is the crash that follows the huge spike of optimism that, this is the future. Everybody's going to be working with VR goggles from home, and realizing that, no, it's not going to be that. But at the same time, it'll probably come back up again. People will realize that, maybe, if I do need to stay at home, if my family is sick, or if, there's some other reason, why not allow your employee with a laptop to work from home? Why not use, virtual call software and so on? I'm lucky I work at a place that does do that, but it's kind of funny how right now it sounds like Japan is still in that crash and disillusionment phase of teleworking. Diving back into the comments, just checking back here. Paragoti, am I still listening to the coup workout song? Well, yeah, okay, the coup workout song, apart from the fact that was awesome. My mum was a jazzercise teacher. I grew up in the 80s. So I grew up listening, I was either in the car with my dad listening to country music, or I was in the car with my mum listening to Eurobeat and, jazzercise music. So I was destined to have terrible taste in music. And I grew up sitting in the back of my mum's aerobics classes. I remember. And I believe, and in army camps, right? So it's perfect. Having someone doing aerobics with a military coup taking place in the background is I can get into this music. So I was like, I found it a catchy tune, and somebody in one of the Twitter feeds they had, this is the track, and so I was playing the video and I was thinking, this is actually kind of a cool track. So I tweeted, I think I might be getting into Myanmarese gangster pop dance music. And then someone corrected me, that's Indonesian. So I didn't know this. And you know what? It did occur to me that the people in the video didn't look like what I have an image of Myanmarese people looking like. Not that I have a great idea of what Myanmarese people look like, but it turns out they were Indonesians. But it turns out that aerobics instructor was doing that routine to Indonesian music, but apparently the song means go get the boss. And the video, by the way, the music video, have you seen the music video for that music that was playing for the aerobics person doing the aerobics? And apparently it was real. It wasn't a green screen. It was on a roundabout in front of the presidential palace as all the armored cars were going around in the background to take over the government. The song is the song apparently means go get the boss or something. It's literally, I'm gonna kill the mob boss. So it's actually kind of, for Indonesians, it even makes more sense, believe it or not. And the video is ultra violent. It's actually kind of disturbing. I mean, it sounds like the sort of thing you would hear anywhere in Southeast Asia. But I don't know. I kind of dug it. So thank you for asking, Paragoti. It was an awesome song. I did listen to it for several days, probably up to 30 million views now, and about 10 million of those will be me. Aaron your things have changed so much more than anyone would have realized. Me too. I mean, the idea that I've been sitting here working, I've been working longer days. I mean, it's just weird how it took me a long time to really adapt to be able to work efficiently at home, but now I am. It's like, I don't want to go back to the office. Like in Tokyo, I've got to commute an hour each way, and that's not a long commute by Japan standards, but the idea that now I will just have a day that's 2 hours shorter with people interrupting me at my desk and stuff like that, like before, like, yeah, I appreciate being able to focus all day. So it's kind of changed for everyone, but yes, indeed, it's interesting. But this reminds me of the old days about how expectations go up and down. And Christopher Luke, excellent to have you there in the comments. Thank you for joining us. And boom, I'm going to dive back into the topics. I wonder how easy this is going to be to edit. It probably would be easier if I changed the background to give visual cues. Maybe I'll do that next week, but onward and upward. Oh yeah. So my MDR7506s. These are like the Technics SL1200s. These are the workhorse. Like haven't changed in 40, 50 years. Every like TV producer, a lot of even music studio people use these because they are just built solid. They just have extremely accurate, solid, reliable sound. Sound engineers use these, camera people use these. Someone recommended these to me who's actually, whoops, didn't mean to bump the mic, who's actually working in the TV industry. And yeah, I just love it. It just, there's no enhanced bass, there's no digital anything. They're just really solid. But of course, like all headphones, they have leather on the top and the bottom, and it disintegrates over time. And you can buy new ear pads, but when the headband disintegrates, that's harder to replace. So yeah, I just got this sort of, I found this for like, what was it, like 900 yen? Got it online. And I got some kind of fancier, they cost a little bit more for the ear pads, but those were disintegrating too. I'm actually kind of chuffed with how this is looking now. I actually do have some expensive Sony ones as well, the WMX, what is this, the WH1000 MX3s. I wish they'd use easier names. These are awesome too, but just for when I'm working, these are pretty cool. Thank you, Sergeant Bilko. I'm quite satisfied with these. I must admit, the ear pads actually finalize it. But yeah, the cover is actually, I'm pretty happy with that too. I did put duct tape over it first just to stop it disintegrating all over my head. But quite like these. So yes, very happy about that. Apple, keep seeing stories about Apple putting out an electric car, basically an Apple version of the Tesla. Before I dive into that, in fact, this isn't going to be a main subject anyway, so I'll come back. Comments, yes, Sergeant Bilko, thank you for the compliments on the good job. And Christopher Luke, are they comfortable for long use? Yeah, they are. I mean, again, these are the sorts of headphones that people wear in studios like all day. Yeah, I find that they are. Of course, they are full over ear. So some people like them. People have very different reactions to stuff over their ears. But for me, I've worn these headphones on like long haul flights. Look a bit silly with the curly cable on them, but yeah, the sound is just really good. So and with the new headband and so on, I haven't really tried a marathon session, but it's pretty solid. So yeah, a refurbishment. Well, this is the thing. These things are built to last forever, but the leather parts on them will only last for a few years. So it seems like a waste to throw the whole thing away when they work perfectly well. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how they brushed up. Quick thing, just on the car thing, the idea that Apple's going to be making their own version of a Tesla, and just the fact that actually right now with the electronic vehicle market, that is all these consumer electronics companies that are like diving into this at the moment. It could very well be that Samsung and Apple could be selling cars just the same as Teslas and so on. And as you already know, my vision of cars that you don't even need to sit in a driver's seat, that's just that you can sit or sleep or work or do whatever in these cars, and that these will be more home entertainment. You can watch movies and whatever. The idea, if you ever experienced a Japanese traffic jam, like going to the beach or coming back from the beach, especially coming back from the beach, you surf all day, you're sunburned, you're with some friends who eat ramen, drink beer, and then drive back and then doze when they're at the wheel. I had a rule that I wouldn't let. I just wouldn't drink, and I would drive everybody back just because it was just a habit for my Japanese friends to end up bright red faced and dozing at the wheel after half a shandy after a day surfing. I mean, you're just exhausted. The idea of just being able to sleep all the way back and not have to worry about it excites me about EVs, and I know that we're getting really close to that in Japan, and the idea that Apple and so on are breaking into this, and they're looking for partners to manufacture with. And all of the news has been that, that they're looking at doing a deal with Hyundai, and I thought, well, that kind of makes sense, because Hyundai, honestly, they look nice, but they're kind of crappy cars. But if they can make an EV that's up to Apple standards, then it might actually be great for Hyundai's brand, for a Korean car manufacturer. But yeah, it turns out that there are Japanese makers in the running as well, Nikkei Shimbun is pointing out. And whoever gets the deal on it, actually, I'll be really excited to see. Again, the more players that there are in the EV space, just, pushing. It's all brand new technology. So, increasing the range, increasing the speed, increasing the comfort, increasing the ability of the cars to drive themselves. And there being like an arms race on that, I find very exciting. So, yeah, this is kind of cool. And it sounds like we're probably going to find out in the next month or so exactly who the manufacturing partner is going to be, and I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, back into the comments. PB, no need for a driving test 5 years from now, or send your car to take it. Well, damn straight, right? And again, you think about a country like Japan. I've got a story about this, I think, saved for later on to talk about. But you think about how many, what percentage of the population is elderly? How many accidents are there? I mean, including accidents causing deaths. Involving elderly people and so on, and the fact that if you live in a remote part of the country, when you become unable to drive, that's the end. You can't live there anymore. So it's actually, I think it's actually, like in Japan more than other countries, a national emergency to get self-driving cars out there as soon as possible. So yeah, I'm super excited about it, and I love that Japan has a big incentive to sort of push in that area. You can live out of your car, yes you can. I'm sure that's what a lot of people are going to do. Next story, I encouraged everyone heartily when this came out, install the COVID-19 tracing app on your phone, just because it's a responsible thing to do. The more people have it installed, the more the chance that if anybody gets COVID-19, you're helping the health bureau people who have to do the contact tracing figure out. You can't remember every shop that you went to or every person that you stood close to for more than 15 minutes. But if you have an app which does that and does all of that contact tracing automatically when you get it, I mean, it just makes it easier to trace and be able to contain the spread of the pandemic. In fact, the academics around the contact tracing apps at the beginning of the pandemic were that if you could get more than something like 70% of the population to use these apps, then you could effectively manage a pandemic without even the need for widespread testing or vaccinations. You could actually control it well enough by identifying and tracing the sources quickly. Of course, the adoption was never that high when this app came out. But even if it had been, it turns out it didn't matter because the app hasn't been working since September, which is annoying because the app noticeably burns up extra battery. It runs in the background on iPhones and Android phones. And so it's been chewing up battery life and resources. It hasn't clicked even once for me, which either means I'm very lucky. I mean, I have been working mostly at home, but clearly no, the reason is just that it wasn't working. I could have been sitting right beside somebody with it, and I would never have known. So yeah, that's disappointing. And most of the backlash is not so much that the app doesn't work, but just that it turns out that the government ministries that put these apps out, again, were just so digitally illiterate that nobody had the capability to even detect that there was a problem with it. So yeah, that's the thing. If you've got the app, I found that very, very annoying. They say that they're going to fix it now, but yeah, as much as I'm an advocate that this is a good idea and it requires mass participation, it's just typical. I wish the Japanese government, you talk about the Galapagos cycles and how out of sync Japan is, ahead in some areas and behind in others. It is desperately decades behind in government IT use and awareness. And it's super frustrating. It's something that it's great to see that Japan is starting this whole digital agency with the aim of sort of getting the Japanese government up to speed. And it's a good opportunity for Japan to leap ahead a cycle and get it in the future. But this is exactly the sort of reason why, because this is just crazy that this happens time and time again. Back into the comments. Nicholas, hello. Good to have you in the comments, and thank you for saying hello. Love it when people drop in and say hello. So thank you for that. Tikyo Sam. Tikyo Sam, always a man of excellent judgment, I see. So yes, indeed. Thank you for that. Yeah, this was an interesting one. I didn't really, I wasn't sure whether to even bother covering this because this sort of thing just happens so often. But yeah, I read the story and it is worth quickly mentioning. I mean, we've just had the wife of the Minister of Justice also facing a donation, bribery, corruption scandal. The wife was recently convicted of this. You've got the casino scandal. You can't even keep up with all the corruption scandals in government right now. We had 3 members of the LDP, well, actually 2 members of the LDP, one from Komeito, which is the ruling coalition partner, had to resign for the BBC put it going clubbing. Not this sort of clubbing, going to a expensive Ginza hostess bar, which also probably isn't what you think it is. It's literally, most of the time, just sitting and having drinks with someone pouring drinks and laughing at your jokes, and people pay a lot of money for that. But the drinks are usually watered down. It never really made a lot of sense to me. But yeah, it was for 3 politicians. It was worth getting fired for, at least having to resign for. But another scandal. The Prime Minister, Yoshihide Suga, or Suga Yoshihide, I suppose, if we're following Kono Taro rules, has 3 sons, and apparently one of those sons apparently works in a business, doesn't say exactly what the business is, but was taking out people from the ministry that regulates, the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications that regulates the business that his son runs. His son wined and dined bureaucrats that regulate him for extremely expensive sort of dinners without a quid pro quo, without an express request attached to it. But basically it is bribery in Japan is considered bribery legally. It's not bribery to bribe anyone that's not a government official. But if you are actually bribing, at the same time, if you're a government official, you're not supposed to accept gifts, including gifts in the form of meals or entertainment, worth anything more than, like, I believe the line is like 2,000 yen. There are different guidelines under different sort of bureaucrats' laws. The son of Yoshihide Suga took out these people who regulate him to a dinner worth an extravagant amount of that money, and apparently the bureaucrats themselves were mortified when they realized how much it was, and they sort of turned themselves in and paid the money back. But his son is more complicated, because his son, before going into private business, actually worked at that ministry as an advisor, as a secretary for his father, when his father was working for the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications. So he knew exactly who he was bribing. So yeah, the Prime Minister's getting grilled for that, and the impropriety and corruption of everybody else in his party. It's like Brewster's Millions. It's like the government's trying to deliberately lose, and it's kind of like it just shows how terrible the opposition is, that they can't seem to capitalize on all of this. But it's just crazy how often these sorts of stories seem to come up in the news. So yeah, that was something that I noticed in the news this week. Back into the comments. Gene, boom, good to have you in the comments. Thank you for joining us. Believe in yourself. What about intimate favors? Yeah, well, again, in terms of taking someone to a hostess bar or something like that, that in itself is normal. But of course, it's normal by cultural practice standards, and it's actually kind of boring most of the time. But who knows what can happen in the background of that. But yeah, the fact that the Prime Minister's son was caught effectively illegally bribing bureaucrats from a ministry that not only regulates his business, but that he himself used to work for, just doesn't look good. And I don't think necessarily that the dad put him up to that, but it just shows again the culture of just, there is corruption here, and it's just kind of crazy how casually it takes place. Well, Black Tengu, good to have you. Good to have you in the chat, by the way. And indeed it has. There was no real honeymoon for Suga. And it just reminds me as I say that, and I look at the screen. I probably should call him Sugar. It makes him at least sound a little bit more gangster. But no, he's had no honeymoon, and it has definitely crashed. Back into the stories. One really big topic on Twitter this week that generated a lot more comments than I expected. This is not a new story. This has actually been happening the whole 23 years I've been in Japan. This has been a story, constant story, but it has been an increasing trend that there are fewer and fewer Japanese people who want to live or work or study abroad. And I suppose particularly, I guess where it really seemed to resonate when I posted this, and I made the comment that, yeah, this is definitely a pronounced trend in the 1990s. maybe it was partly my perception of the world. I lived in New Zealand, and I associated with a lot of Japanese who studied abroad, and when I first came to Japan, all the Japanese that I knew were people who had studied abroad. So my social surroundings were also surrounded by a lot of Japanese people who had gone overseas to go and do university and come back to Japan. So I saw a lot of people like that. But it is certainly a trend in society as well that those people that save and scrimp and, you know, trying to get out of Japan and trying to go overseas, or people who get sent overseas by their parents because they didn't get into a good university in Japan, or as some way to get ahead of the game or whatever, just isn't happening so much anymore. And it seems to coincide. Definitely, it was a big deal during the bubble. It was sort of a way, going to a prestigious American university or something like that was a way to get into a good job at a bank or something like that. So when people were going for lifetime employment at big companies, and when it was a real rat race and whatever, in terms of the old Japanese, you know, bubble economy, going overseas was sort of a big deal, and a lot of people would do it either to do better in the rat race in Japan or to escape the rat race in Japan. I mean, either way, there was an incentive to go overseas, and it was really common, certainly up through the 1990s. Even when the bubble burst, there were still a lot of people that were going overseas for different reasons, and it was pretty common. And it really just doesn't happen so much anymore. I think where it resonated with a lot of people on Twitter who were talking about this was particularly among English teachers that find it difficult enough as it is to motivate their students to show an interest in English. Obviously, if you're a teacher, the main reason that you'd want to encourage people to learn English is if you learn English, you can travel. You can go, travel the world and, enjoy it and so on. Think of all the interesting conversations you can have with people all over the world. And as much as you'd want to say that to excite people and motivate people, of course, it's hard when the subject's being rammed down the throat, like the same as math or, history or geometry or something like that. It's something that kids are forced to do. They're not given the option to choose to do it. So, keeping them motivated is hard to do. And, it's even harder when the students have no aspiration at all to actually use the language and are totally demotivated from going abroad. And there was lots of comments reacting to the story on Twitter talking about, students, it's the education system that crushes their spirits, and that's why they don't want to go overseas. And I thought, well, yeah, maybe, but at the same time, I don't think the education system is any less crushing now than it was during the 1980s and 90s. In fact, if anything, it's probably gotten better. But so I'm sure that's a part of it, but it's obviously not the reason. Different theories came up, and my amateur psychology theory on it is, well, one, the obvious benefits of going abroad for the idea of getting ahead and coming back haven't played out so much anymore. When you're in a country that's being depopulated, where there are more jobs available than there are people, generally speaking, pandemic aside, there's no real perceived advantage. And when the lifetime employment thing is out the window, the idea of getting into a big trading house as something like that as a top job, when the top jobs that people want to be are YouTubers, then why would you go and spend 2 or 3 years in America? There's no advantage to that. I think the other thing that I've often talked about on this channel is just how even as the Japanese economy declines, it's also been kind of too successful at just making its people comfortable. And anything that hints at struggle or, loss of comfort, marriage, relationships, living with people, I think going overseas is a bit like that as well. People just have very comfortable, settled lives where, it just adds trouble and complication with no clear benefit that people can see. Now, obviously, here as an immigrant myself, I think there are benefits to going overseas. In fact, I remember I used to have the idea that instead of, if Japan's considering bringing back conscription, which I'd read about, I'd sometimes say, rather than conscription, where you have to pay to feed, clothe, give salaries to people or whatever for the period of the military service, 2 or 3 years, pay for them to go overseas for 2 to 3 years, pay them a salary, pay their living costs overseas. You'll have a better educated, more worldly population that will do better, for the same cost. You'll actually get better money back, better value for your money spent on sending people away than having them serve in military service. But that sort of thinking is going out the window. And in a way, I put in the title tonight, Hikikomori Nation. I do wonder if it's not only an over comfort, doing nothing, staying at home, combined with a fear of going out into the world as well, like nothing but sort of trouble and whatever. there is a kind of a thing across the society here. I've always said Japan is an awesome place to be single, to live in a mini spaceship apartment. But it can be lonely, but there's any number of things to do when you go out. And the reason I think so many foreigners are coming to Japan is they're discovering the same thing, is validating Japanese views of themselves, that they're in a pretty comfortable place to live, which I think Japan is. But at the same time, it's obviously not in Japan's long-term interest to have people that are not engaged or understanding or motivated to understand the rest of the world. So it is a troublesome trend, which I do think the government should actually, as a matter of policy, try to reverse. But it is pronounced. And I don't just blame the education system for it. I think the whole society has just sort of made it. It's just become a very comfortable house to stay at home and never leave. The whole country's just become like a bit of a shut-in sort of a culture, is my take on it. So yeah, looking at the comments, what do people say there in the comments? Just the compliments from Tikyo Sam, nothing else directed at me. Any new commenters? I see we've got Broccoli. Nice handle name, Broccoli. Your big broccoli household here. Ben Grant, father, I don't know what you're talking about. And more people saying that I'm obviously missing something there in the comments. But yes, obviously people there having fun in the comments, which I'm sure I will discover later on. I will keep progressing forward because we only have 3 minutes left and we haven't even hit the main subject yet, which isn't this. God dang it. Okay, onward. This just seemed to trigger outrage. So yes, I tweeted this. I didn't just tweet it as is. Indeed, there was a sample of 15,000 people in Tokyo, Osaka, and Nagoya that showed that apparently less than 1% of the population, something like 0.9% of the population, appears to have antibodies indicating that they'd recently had COVID-19. I thought that's interesting because, in India they did a similar sort of a study with a 28,000 person sample group, and they found 21% of the population had recently had COVID-19. And they've done similar studies in New York and London, which have also shown higher percentages, indicating that they might be moving towards getting towards herd immunity. This data, if it's reliable, implies that Japan is nowhere close to getting herd immunity. On the one hand, it could be seen as good news that, it looks like it hasn't been, spreading as much as people, were worried that it was. That there were every time there's a statistic put forward, the daily numbers of COVID-19 cases, there are people who put forward that no, that's fake news. They're hiding it. There are private tests. They're hiding the numbers. They're trying to save the Olympics. And there's all this doubt about that the statistics and the data is reliable. And of course, there's all the flaws that there are with the data. There's it doesn't collect every single test. It's never an absolute number, and any scientific number can be challenged. But I don't like this trend of, when you have no other data or no basis other than simple mistrust of science, and your gut feeling that the government must be lying to you as the basis to question it, then I don't think that's a good thing to just simply launch off and say, that this is all fake news. But yeah, this was another study which shows that it seems that it just hasn't spread as much in Japan as it has elsewhere. It's no mission accomplished thing, and it might not even be accurate. This is another point. But if anything, it's bad news. It means that Japanese and people living in Japan like myself will be less able to travel when this normalizes than people from other countries, because there'll be a much lower chance of having antibodies already. Setting aside all the other things that, someone could have had it more than 3 months ago and have no antibodies anymore. People seem to experience it different ways. Yes, all the flaws accepted. It is a large enough group for a statistical analysis to show, it's an interesting outcome. It says that it just hasn't spread here as much, which, does make me wonder, when you compare to other places. And it's true that Japanese are paranoid about germs. Paranoid as hell compared to where I come from. They really are. And remember, New Zealand's done better, and New Zealand is definitely not as hygienic as Japan. New Zealand's done better. So that doesn't mean anything, that obviously the degree of hygiene. It's just an interesting number. When I showed this, a lot of people immediately started attacking if the number was credible. I don't think attacking the scientists and statisticians that are doing the surveys, I don't think attacking that is really the right way to do it, and it wasn't presented as a political finding. But yeah, triggered a lot of reaction. It's just an interesting stat that, this is the only sort of large antibody study, and hopefully there'll be more and there'll be bigger ones, but just as an indication to back up, is it actually spreading more or less than we thought? It's spreading about as much as was thought, which is actually, so far it seems, this is only an indicator, it's nothing absolute, that it hasn't spread very much, which is it's kind of interesting just how different it's been, or it appears to have been. And if anything, I do think that Japan's success at handling it has been in spite of the government response, certainly not because of it. It's been totally slack here, basically. People are walking around everywhere, but people do wear masks, and people generally, don't talk on trains. People are sort of antisocial, and maybe those things help. But yeah, interesting step. Man, we still haven't gotten to the main story. Keep pushing on. Oh, nice to see. Sleepy314, good to have. Santa Cruz, I think you were here before, right? Santa Cruz, California, good to have you back, the home of skateboarding and surfing. Nice to have someone from Santa Cruz there in the comments. Backup says, for a sec, you thought you'd spotted a 5x5 behind me there. Looking closer. No, I've got a 2x2 and a 3x3. I do not have a 5x5 at all. But nice of you to notice. Lysander 45. How much did GoTo Travel help the spread? There's a paper that came out that said it helped it quite a bit, but that doesn't mean that the government isn't planning another reboot of GoTo as soon as the numbers come down and they can spread it again. Might it have been concentrated to Tokyo, Osaka if the city people had not been incentivized to go to the countryside for tourism purposes? Common sense says yes. But we don't know. The government deliberately isn't looking into it. To me, it's just obviously, how could it not have contributed to the spread around the country? But yeah, what can we do? Andrea, 1:30 a.m. still probably driving the tennis players around. That tough job as well, her working with the tennis, with everything going on with all the COVID cases there. I hope that Andrea Mowboy is doing well. I'm going to dive into the next topic. The next topic that we have is just a stupid story, but you hear these things now and again about the stupid rules that many schools have in Japan. Like, for example, not dyeing hair, or sometimes not allowing kids with naturally brownish hair to have naturally brownish hair and forcing them to dye it artificially black to blend in and so on. You don't hear so many of those sorts of stories anymore, but apparently there are schools. Not clear to me from the story if this is a public or a private school. Sounds a bit like it might be a private school, but apparently there are schools that have rules, actual school rules, that there shall be no dating. And, well... Not a problem I had in high school, I guess. But man, I wish I could have been expelled for that. But I went to in New Zealand, most of the schools are single sex. So even finding girls, to sort of know, let alone then having to compete and actually be successful. No, I was a late bloomer. But apparently the school, yes, has this rule, and apparently a teacher somewhere outside of school hours, spotted two of the students in a sort of a friendly-looking situation and questioned them both, and they confessed to dating. And as a result, the girl was told that you should voluntarily leave the school 6 months before graduation, because if you don't, we'll expel you, and then you'll have expulsion on your school record, and that'll make things even worse. So you should voluntarily leave. And she gave in to the pressure. She quit school, and it had a big detrimental effect on her life after that. So now she is suing the school for $35,750. I mean, if it was America, it'd be like $50 million. Japan has always scaled back a bit, but psychological distress and hell yeah, sue that school. Suing her school for dating. I mean, the first thing is first rule of date club is you don't talk about date club. But why would you even tell your teacher that? Like, what business is it of the teacher? It is funny. There is a thing in Japanese culture where about not being honest. Like, there's no concept of confessional in Japanese culture. The idea that the best policy is always honesty. Get it off your chest and share it. So and being rewarded for honesty. There isn't that concept in Japanese culture. It's just like, how could you be so stupid? Which is how most of the reaction to the story is. But at the same time, there is universal net agreement that the school is ridiculous and hoping that they will lose the case. The case is still going on, but that is an interesting story of another kind of ridiculous rule. Like, who cares what's going on outside of school? But kids, keep it to yourselves. Pushing ahead. Wow, we still haven't even got to the main story, and we're already 5 minutes over time. I am going to keep going. Yes, please. Thank you, Erin, for... We haven't gotten to Mori and his big mouth. Okay, I'm just going to do that rant at the end. This was fun. was it PB, a person from Germany. I didn't know this. Of course, in English, we will say, hey, it's all Greek to me. I don't if it's all gobbledygook. If I can't make out what it's saying, I don't know what it's all about. We say Greek in English. Apparently, they also say Greek in Norway and Swedish. But apparently, they say Chinese in most parts, it seems, of Europe. In Italy, they say it's all Arabic to me. In Turkey, they say it's all French to me, which is kind of interesting. Don't know quite what's going on with Finland and Iceland. Maybe Borat's going to be coming from there in the future. Who knows? But you got that. But then right in the middle of it, you got Germany, where they say, I understand only railway station. Germany wins the prize. Man, I'm going to start using Germany. Clearly, they've figured out a way to... I guess Denmark as well. I have no idea what Volapük is, but no, Germany, functional and nonsensical. I think that they've gotten that one. I see Sergeant Bilko. I assume that's not Swedish profanity. I'll put that one up there. Everyone can see it anyway. But that is the. I think that is the winner for It Does Not Make Sense to Me. And here we go. Finally, jeez, and how many more of these? Still got a few more stories. Okay, well, look, Mori, everybody saw the news story about Mori saying that, when being asked by the Asahi Shimbun, a liberal, leftist, trendy newspaper, what are you going to do with the new targets about having at least 40% women on all boards associated with the Olympics? And he said, well, we have women, they're just going to be competitive and they're just going to want to talk all the time and, they're going to make the meetings go slower. So, no, I'm not really for it. And, what's remarkable that the former Prime Minister would say something like this is that he hasn't said it like every single day, like until now. How has he gone so long without saying something like this? Now that you think about it, it's actually remarkable. When he was Prime Minister, and I've said it a million times before, he was the worst Prime Minister Japan has had post-war. I've heard people say that Konoe, like during the war, was the worst Prime Minister Japan's ever had, but number two, maybe in the 20th century or 21st century. He was forced to resign, being thrown under the bus by his own cabinet secretary when a fishing boat was sunk by an American submarine when its nets got caught by a submarine off Hawaii. A bunch of school kids died. There was a national crisis, and he wouldn't rush to the emergency room because he was playing a game of golf with money on it, and he didn't want to be disturbed. And he sort of, among many other steps, and the fact that he would just basically constantly gaff, and not even gaff. I mean, a gaff implies, splitting something out by accident. It's not by accident. He completely believes what he's saying. The guy should not be in charge of a freaking, I don't want to say what I could, whatever lowly job I could think of that he shouldn't be in charge of. I wouldn't want to say it because most people who do lowly jobs are respectable, honorable, good people, and this guy is not. He should not be in charge of anything, and yet they put him in charge of the Rugby World Cup and the Olympics. So look, I won't go into too much depth about this, but everybody saw this. This guy is not fit for being in charge of an organization. The reaction to it, for a start, the Olympics minister is a woman, and the governor of Tokyo is a woman, and they were both dumbfounded and kind of mortified by it. But at the same time, they both know this person and what a doofus he is. More concerningly, and what the Tokyo governor also pointed out, apart from the flood of complaints to the Tokyo prefectural government about the statement, I mean, again, it's a bit like writing the letter to the newspaper. Now people send complaints to the governor in Tokyo. But more than that, a large number of volunteer workers for the Olympics who are already probably struggling for motivation for the fact it's been delayed by 12 months and is still during a pandemic, and it seems like a terrible idea to do anyway. The fact that they're doing this they're promising to be volunteers, giving up days and days of personal time to support the Olympics when it's being run by a guy who thinks that, chicks shouldn't talk. And sincerely believes that. And just for an idea that it was this a misspeak, apart from the fact, if you saw his apology press conference where he was supposed to come in, where he retracted the comments and apologized, and now I'm going to get on with the business of running the Olympics. He, when people sort of pushed him, well, do you think this is sufficient? He's like, well, what do you think, bozo? He basically just started, attacking the journalists who were asking him more questions. And then on a talk show like after that, where he went on TV, he said, well, you know what? I mean, it's not like what I was saying about women was completely without basis. So, it's like it was completely insincere, national embarrassment up and down. I mean, it's like the case of having the embarrassing failed job manager where they've tried to put him in some, department where they think he won't cause any trouble, like PR. They put him in a highly, like what were they even thinking, allowing him to be in charge of the Olympics in the first place? Of course, this is going to happen. And the only theory that I can think about this making sense is perhaps the governor said, or the prime minister told him, "Hey Yoshiro, I know that you've been really good sort of holding it quiet until now, but I think the media really needs to get to know the real you. Why don't you go and tell the Asahi exactly what you think about women being on the board?" As a secret plot to get the Olympics cancelled. Seriously, I kind of said that as a joke, but it could kind of be real because that wasn't a gaffe. That was him being his actual self. Just what an absolute disgrace. And for me as well, it's kind of like, as much as I've kind of been like, well, I don't see how they're going to have the Olympics, but if they have them, good luck to them, and hope they do well. What an absolute joke. I mean, yes. So anyway, outrageous. The outrage is justified. It is continuing, and it's seriously actually affecting the culture and morale of the Olympic organization. And look, the Olympics aside, he should not be in charge of it. It's just simple as they shouldn't be in charge of anything. So that's former Prime Minister Mori. That's the Coco Apley. This is the worst. I won't even go through this. This is just something that came up. I think it's actually fake. This was going around in Japanese and it got picked up by Sora News. It's a letter to someone who had the gall to quit. Many Japanese companies believe that employees are not allowed to quit. Oh, and finally, more and more crashes involving elderly drivers of cars, trucks, and taxis and buses. And often due to illness-related accidents. And this is the thing, you got more and more 70, 80-year-old drivers of trucks, buses, and so on, and they're having medical episodes while driving. Another reason that you can't have self-driving trucks and cars soon enough, and why I'm really excited for all this technology, which is rushing ahead right now. And those are all the topics. I'm 10 minutes over. What could I do? I was probably a misogynist. Yes, I think Detective Black Tengu has solved the case. So yeah, 10 minutes over. Sorry, Erin. We're going to do an experiment. So we're just going to chop out parts of the show. So if you've already joined the show live, of course, you probably don't have to worry about the episodes during the week. But I do want to see if we can get some more people, just give them a taste of what the show is about. Really appreciate Erin once again being the channel manager. And seeing how it goes with this. Remember to like if you liked. I really do appreciate everybody coming in each week. Let's do a final browse of the comments and then I'll say goodbye. Sorry I went 10 minutes over, but there was a lot to talk about this week. I really should have led with the Mori thing. I should have put that at the front. But yeah. Odie Jr., I can do it. Well, I did have to cut it a little bit short in the end, but we got there in the end. Quint Ranked, in Japan, who cares what goes on outside of school? Doesn't what goes on outside of school reflect on everyone at the school? Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose. And look, even where I was, I in New Zealand, everywhere has school uniforms, and sure, teachers will tell off kids not wearing their school uniforms properly outside of school, even in public schools and whatnot. But yeah, Paragoti, indeed. Someone told me this today. I won't even attempt the I won't even attempt the pronunciation, but I do like it. It's something I think English should borrow. And Barry Convicts, your mother said it's double Dutch to you. Oh, that kind of makes sense as well. I think I've heard that before. All Martian. That's a good one. I think in English you say with a T, but yes. Not that much. So that's how German language got famous on Tokyo Tonight. It's German. It's go for it. I think it's kind of funny. German has a reputation for not having a good sense of humor, but it all sounds like railway station to me. It's like saying monkey, apple, carburetor. I'm all down with that. Well, Lysander 45, the face of a man who asks every woman he meets why he hasn't made him tea yet. Indeed, that is a man, even his wife, as he declared, doesn't love. Shubis, I'm glad that you love the 10 minutes over, but I did miss my goal. So, yeah, Sergeant Bilko, where's the gangster country jazz we've all been waiting for? I'll get to the gangster country jazz. Well, for now, you've got Indonesian Myanmar coup music, which I do encourage everyone to go listen. What is it? Ampang Bang Jago. It's a banging tune. You should go check it out. The video is something else. I did retweet it. You should check that out. Hit the like button indeed. Can you be a moderator? Of course. I tell you what, I'm going to give you the moderator powers. Add moderator. Boom. Aaron is a moderator. Everyone be nice to Aaron. Thank you for that. And yeah, no, I appreciate that. And yeah, looks like we're at the end of it. So the butter, yes. It was a long show, a lot to talk about tonight. I'll be back here. I've got nothing better to do. I'll be back here same time next week as I am every single week. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Remember to like if you liked. I do appreciate it. It does help the show. And look out for some experiments during the week. And yeah, support the smaller videos as well. We'll see how they go. Have a good week, everybody. Stay safe. Take care. Kakita no peace. Boom. Ending stream. I should always be ready to end the stream when I say that. It'd be cool. I have this awkward ending, shuffling around phase. Do I really want to end? Yes. It's the time to go. See you later. Quick, moderate something. Wait a minute. I'm just going to leave it there. Aaron, moderate. There's a bunch of butter emojis. My kryptonite. Held for moderation. It's not going through. Who knows? Anyway. I'll see you all later. Have a good week, everybody. Peace.